I love the fact that there's a lot of networking going on already. So we're off to a good start. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all for coming tonight. Welcome. This used to be a church. This is a call and response process. Welcome. Good evening. All right, thank you. Good evening and welcome, and thanks for coming tonight. My name is Bob Woodward, and I'm the publisher at TH Media, publisher of Telegraph Herald, and vice president of Woodward Community Media. And we are excited to start the first of our 7 diversity, equity, and inclusion series, Make Dubuque Better. Let's talk about, and tonight our topic is housing. So thank you very much for coming tonight. We're going to talk about housing, home rentership, home ownership. We want to talk about how we can make it more accessible, more affordable, more equitable to everyone, but especially to people who have struggled to achieve some of those goals for this most basic need, housing. Many of you might have attended our I'm a Man event last August, and after that, even though we had a tornado 45 minutes beforehand, we had a huge crowd, both in person at the Art Museum and also online, and everybody came away saying, awesome job. What's next? When are you going to do this again? Well, we wanted to do it sooner than this, but it didn't work out, and we did use the spring to do some planning, and now we're back in force, and we are working and partnering with the Community Foundation of Greater Dubuque on this 7-part series. So over the next 8 months, we're going to be talking about 7 topics, 7 events. The next one is also going to be here next month, and I'll be talking a little bit more about that after tonight's panel presentation. So we're partnering, I mentioned, with the Community Foundation of Greater Dubuque, and this perfectly dovetails with their Community Equity Profile Project. And you're going to hear more about that from Alex Baum from the Community Foundation in just a few minutes. And I also want to take this time to thank the Community Foundation, Nancy Van Milligan, Bobby, Mary Jo, Clara, Jeff, and everybody from the Community Foundation who has been partnering with us on this project. Thank you, Foundation. So this is important stuff. We need to figure this out. We need to identify opportunities. We need to identify them and move forward with them. It's important from a moral standpoint. It's important from an economic standpoint, and it's important from a job standpoint. We have to figure this out, and it starts tonight. We got to keep moving the ball forward. This is tough stuff. It's not going to happen immediately, but we have to make progress. I want to also mention the 7 sponsors who are involved with this. Please hold your applause to the end, and then you can go crazy. So John Deere Dubuque Works, Mark Dixon, and the rest of the group there at John Deere. Cottingham and Butler, Andy Butler and Dave Becker. I know some of them are here tonight. Hodge Companies, Tim Hodge and Jordan Fullen. Greater Dubuque Development Corporation, Rick Dickinson and his staff there. Also want to thank the Dubuque Area Chamber of Commerce, Molly Grover and her team. Northeast Iowa Community College, Dr. Herb Rydell. And tonight's lead sponsor is Green State Credit Union. Now you can have your applause. So Green State has been a leader in this field, in the field of home loans, and they're looking to help close Iowa's racial home ownership gap. Green State started off pledging $500 million to create a fund for home loans to people of color, and they quickly figured out that they wanted to go more, and so they are now up to $1 billion dedicated to home loans for people of color. So tonight we're happy to have welcome from Jeff Disterhoff. He's the president and CEO of Green State, and just this week Jeff received an award from the Iowa Credit Union Foundation. The Impact Award that he received was for his advocacy engagement in the Cedar Rapids, Iowa City corridor, as well as for his visionary stance on closing the home ownership equity gap. Please welcome Jeff Disterhoff.
Thank you. Appreciate it. I am certain this is the first, last, and only time that I'm going to stand in a podium in a church and deliver a message. So I'm fairly confident God is asleep right now. He's not paying attention. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. But seriously, thank you so much for having me here this afternoon. It's a real honor to be here on behalf of our 400,000 member owners, our volunteer board of directors, and our staff. So thank you again. I got to be honest with you, to see this many people this excited to talk about housing in a community this size is really special. So you guys are to be commended for carving out the time to be in here tonight and stuff. So I'm actually going to begin with a personal story to help you understand how I ended up behind this podium here this evening. Closer to the mic. There you go. Bueller, can you hear me now? All right. Now it seems like it's way too loud. Go back and forth like this. All right. I'm going to tell a personal story before we get into explaining how I ended up correct today. I want to remind you to relate since I was a small town kid, born and raised in Iowa, about 2 hours and that way here now. And a young man by the name of Van Hardy moved to the community. I was 8 years old at the time. Van was a refugee from the killing fields of Cambodia. And in short order, Van and I became best friends. And so while that was awesome, what wasn't awesome was that Van was the only black person, as near as I could tell, in Iowa County, Iowa. And so we were best friends for quite a while, but as years go by, we drift apart. But because of that, I think I had this perception that I had no racial biases, that I had it all figured out. I mean, my best friend was the only black person, what seemed like in 100 miles, right? So that was not so good. Fast forward to 6 years ago, our son Nate was a freshman at the University of Iowa. And he was taking a class in his freshman year called Politics and Race. And I don't know how many of you have kids that have gone through college, but he would grace us with his presence every Sunday evening in exchange for a little bit of meal and a ride to school. And every Sunday night, he would grill me on my thoughts on race and systemic oppression that's taking place in the United States for frankly over the last 200 plus years. And over the course of the semester, a few things became clear to me. The first of which was, I didn't have race all figured out. The second was, I was still operating as an unconscious biases because of who the world is. And the third, as a white person, middle-aged white male, privileged white male, and there was a lot more I could and should be doing to help, right? He graduated from college. In the meantime, I had embarked on a journey to learn as much as I could about systemic oppression of people of color in the United States. Every book I could find, every movie I could watch, every person I could interview, that's what I did. I tried to learn. And then George Floyd tragedy happens, right? And it was kind of this unique intersection where I felt like, okay, I realize I've got some weaknesses. I realize I've also got some opportunities and some blessings that I've been given. It's time for us as an organization, and it's time for me as an individual to do more. And so we assembled this cross-functional team of board members, senior staff members, and staff themselves to figure out what can Green State do to make a difference. I'm a big fan of the phrase, to that which much has been given, or to those who much has been given, much is expected, right? Green State has been very blessed, and I've been very blessed, right? I also think Green State knows how to make loans and deposits, right? We do checking accounts, credit cards, car loans all day long, and that's fine. But the best legacy I think that we can leave is to make a difference in the lives of the communities who have been marginalized over the last 200 years, not just here in Eastern Iowa, but really, quite frankly, throughout the country. And so we made several commitments. And you might ask, why a credit union? What difference can we make? How many people here, I'm going to guess every single hand's going to go up. How many people here are familiar with United Way? Everybody's familiar. You know what the 3 tenets, give or take, are United Way tries to improve the community? Is there a few? They try to improve the community's health, they try to improve the community's education, and they try to improve their income. So health, education, and income. Now, as a congregational institution, I'm not sure we can do all that much to improve a community's health, at least directly. We just don't have the public policy avenues to do so. And the same, to some extent, with respect to education. We just don't have the avenues to improve education. But when it comes to income, we can make a difference. We can make a real difference in the lives of the communities that we serve, and so can you. Now, so that's just one organization, but let's be honest here. We all have some level of responsibility for racial equity. The imbalance created over the last 200 plus years was a systemic effort, and so it's probably going to take a systemic effort to reverse that which has been done. And so at the same time, you're probably thinking again, why Green State? Why a credit union? Well, look at the world that we live in right now. I don't know if you've noticed, but we're sort of polarized, like really, really polarized, which makes it almost impossible for most governmental organizations to really move the needle. In fact, it makes it pretty hard for even most quasi-governmental organizations to move the needle. So the thought, the phrase, the mantra that keeps coming back to me is, if not us, then who? If not us, then who? And so we started down this path. I mentioned the cross-functional committee that we aimed at, and we focused on affordable housing, because homeownership really creates so many different opportunities. I don't even have to really think about it. Many of you will probably take homeownership for granted, but homeownership improves health, it improves educational attainment, personal wealth, it increases graduation rates, children's health, and wealth while increasing or decreasing behavioral disorders and reliance on government assistance. In short, it moves the needle for those who are in greatest need. Well, the good news and bad news with much of the housing market these days. Good news is the average value of the U.S. housing market has doubled over the past decade and increased 20% over the last year alone. The bad news is not everybody should. Not everybody got a piece of that action. Not everybody got a piece of that 20%. The state of Iowa, for example, if you're a white Iowa in the state of Iowa, 74% of you own your homes. If you're in the Latino community, that number is 49%. And if you're in the black population, that number is just 23%. So whatever disparity existed before just got worse. And it's getting worse every single year when we don't address this issue. So as a result, income disparities are furthered, and the lack of income reduces healthcare outcomes as well as educational opportunities. And so I believe it's one of those increasingly rare opportunities where doing good meets good business. That does not happen all that often. And let me tell you why. Again, I want to keep that in your head. Where doing good meets good business. Over the next 18 years, between now and the year 2040, Iowa's population growth is expected to be 440,000 over the next 18 years. The minority population, the BIPOC community, is expected to grow 490,000 people. That means all the growth in the state of Iowa, and then some, will come from the minority population. So if you're a business such as Green State, it's where the growth is coming from, which is good for business, but it's also what's good for consumers. It's what's good for our communities as well. And it doesn't, just quite frankly, like I said, doesn't happen all that often. So, as mentioned earlier, with the above in mind, or with this in mind, Green State initially committed to doing $500 million to just the black population. In the span of the first 12 months, we figured out a couple things. One, we can blow past $500 million. Two, we're growing a lot as an organization. Three, we're growing into newer markets. And so we doubled the commitment. So now we're committed to doing $1 billion in home loans to the BIPOC population over the next decade. We call that the 10 over 10 program because it's roughly 10% of our assets, more affluent than what we're going to know. But basically, we're doing 10% of our assets in home loans to people of color over the next 10 years. And so that's nice. $1 billion is nice, and hopefully we can make a difference. But let's be honest, $1 billion is probably a drop in the bucket relative to what we need in the state of Iowa. And so we reached out to yesterday and emailed every credit union CEO in the state of Iowa and asked them to match our commitment in 10% of assets over the next decade to home loans to people of color. If we can make that happen, if we can make that happen, that's a $3 billion commitment in just the state of Iowa alone. And so that's credit unions in the state of Iowa. But I got to be honest with you, that's not where I want to end. That's where I want to begin. If we can get great participation among all credit unions in the state of Iowa, and I think we will, then my hope is that we can make it regional. And if we make it regional, then we can make it nationwide. And if we make that nationwide, where credit unions across the country commit to doing 10% of their assets in home loans to people of color over the next decade, that's $200 billion in home loans without one cost to taxpayers across the country. And that's what we're aiming for. So what starts today with one credit union, one community, one state, hopefully is an opportunity for us to make a difference, not just in the state of Iowa, not just in the Midwest, but throughout the United States as a whole. So keep our fingers crossed. I would encourage you to keep putting the pressure on your credit unions to the extent that you can, and we'll see where it goes. So thank you for your time. Good evening, and God bless.
All right, please welcome Alex Baum from the Community Foundation of Greater Dubuque. We're going to go ahead and get this started and start documenting some of the issues here. So, Alex, over to you.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Bob. Can everyone hear me all right in the back? Okay, great. Thank you so much to the TH and to all of our other partners and to Green State as well. What a terrific presentation and a hard one to follow, honestly. But while we're starting to get built up here, I want to talk a little bit about part of the reason we're here tonight in the equity profile, and then lead us off in our discussion today with some of the data, some of the numbers behind our demographics and our housing in Dubuque County, so that we have a little bit of a framework that we can all work on together. The numbers aren't perfect. Data is not perfect, but they're a great common ground to start on as we begin to progress into those other elements of our conversation about what housing means. So because of that, I want to talk a little bit about the community equity profile, which is something that Bob mentioned earlier. Now, this is going to be a 7-month process that we are going to go on together as a community, and that we want to use as an avenue to have a deeper conversation about a lot of the issues that are important to us, things like housing, things like economic well-being, things like transportation. And the way that we've structured this is first, every month we're going to choose a different topic, and we're going to start with a panel, like what we're at tonight. We're going to come together to hear from people, but that's not where we want to stop. We want to use that data and use that panel conversation to then launch a number of surveys to hear from the community about their experience with that topic, and then also to launch a number of community conversations. So we're asking everybody here to come together and to have a conversation and to share your experiences, your concerns, but also your ideas, what you want to see changed and how you think it can be changed, so that we can collect that information, compile it, and then at the end of every month, we are going to send out a snapshot to the community saying what we've learned. And at the end of those 7 months or 8 months, we'll all come back together and try to share it and have a conversation. This is what people in our community are saying, and this is what we need to do to go forward. Now, here are those 7 topics and the months that they are going to go in. So we are starting with housing for the next month. And Bob later is going to talk a little bit about the different community conversations that we're going to be hosting. And we really hope that people here attend them, and attend as many as you can over the next 8 months. And you can see going through all the way down to April, where we'll finish with transportation. We're taking December off because it's cold. But otherwise, we want to have discussions about each of these different topic areas with everyone here. Now, part of the reason we've chosen these 7 is I'm not sure how many of you were here and present in 2015. We actually went through this process before. We hosted community conversations, pulled together data, did surveys, and had conversations about these 7 topics. And part of our commitment was to come back together every 5 years and continue those conversations. Now, some of you may be doing the math there and may realize, it's been 7 years. Unfortunately, 2020, not a great time to bring people together for these kind of conversations. But we're a little bit late, but we want to have those discussions now so we can hold ourselves accountable to what has changed, what hasn't changed, where have we succeeded, and where haven't we. So, through this 7-year gap, the data that I'm going to be showing you is largely going to be recreating what was discussed and what was looked at 7 years ago. So we're trying to use the same data sources. We are trying to use some of the same measurements so that we can have that level of consistency. So if you see something that isn't there, if you say, yes, I see that, but what about this? please reach out to us and we can have that conversation. We're just trying to keep that consistent element going. The last thing that I want to touch on that you may notice is the colors. You may wonder why orange and blue so much feature prominently. It's not because I'm a Bears fan. It's Broncos, but that's besides the point. But we are trying to use colorblind friendly colors for each of these data charts. Just to make it a little bit more inclusive, we got feedback from trusted members of the community that said, this is something easy that you can change. And so we're trying to make that effort right here. So let's get started and talk a little bit about demographics in Dubuque. So this is how our demographics have changed from 1990, 2000, 2010, and finally 2020. And I think you can see a little bit about what we've been talking about so far in the changing demographics. We went from 98% white in 1990 to 85% in 2020. We're still a predominantly white community, but that is a significant change, and you can see that the rate of increase has been growing over recent years, and we expect that to continue. Looking at it more specifically, broken down, you can see which groups have had the largest percentage changes over that time. So take a look both at the numerical change and the percent change. So some of our fastest growing populations are Pacific Islanders, our Black community, different races that aren't necessarily captured as easily within the census data. That's where we're seeing a lot of that demographic change. And that's where we might continue, assume that it's going to continue when we come together 5 years from now as well. Population growth, this is where experts have projected our population growth to go into 2040. And you can see right now we're projected to go at a higher rate than the state of Iowa itself based off of where our 2000 population was. Now, it'll be interesting to see what impact the past couple of years have had, but we're very hopeful that we'll continue to see this rate of growth going forward. And the final thing that I want to talk on, and something that we're going to cover a lot more next month when we talk about workforce and economic well-being, is the area of poverty. And you can see some of the changes. Those middle graphs right there are the 2013 numbers. That's from when we last did this. And then our 2020 is the current data up at top. So you can see we've made some progress during that time, but I think we can have a conversation about whether that progress has been good enough. And when we come together next month, we will look at more specifically which segments of our population are suffering from poverty more than others and where those disparities might lie. Now let's talk a little bit more about housing right now. So this is a list of owner-occupied versus renter-occupied housing broken down by race and ethnicity. On the left, you have from the previous equity profile, and on the right here, you have our current data. Now, a couple of things may stand out to you. There's some pretty shocking disparities. One of the ones that I think we should all draw attention to is the 9% rate for our Black community, which is our second largest racial and ethnic demographic. The fact that only 9% of the community owns their own home should be something that we have a conversation about and think about much more seriously. You can see some of the other changes here, and if you want to look at it more closely, this data is up around here. And like I said, at the end of the month, we will be sharing this data with you in a handout so that you can take it home and peruse it more. If you can't wait that long, please reach out to me and I'm more than happy to share this with anybody. This shows housing cost burden. So what percentage of an individual's income or a household's income is taken up by their housing costs? So the bottom amount, the dark amount, is for households that are 30% or less of their income. The middle section is 30 to 55% of their income. And the lightest coloring, the top part, is 50% and above. And that data is available over here as well. The blue lines are from our previous equity profile, and orange is from the current data. There's a couple of, I think, when you really get up close to it, you can see some of the disparities that we have within our community There's one thing that I want to touch on here quickly, and that is our Pacific Islander population, which, as I said, is our fastest growing population within Dubuque. That may look like a pretty good number, 100% before and 60% at 30% less of income. Those are very good numbers. I would look at those a little bit skeptically for two reasons. Firstly, the sample size isn't huge, so small changes can really fluctuate those numbers. And secondly, and more importantly, a lot of our Pacific Islanders live in multi-generational households. So there might be many families, many different income earners living in the same household. If you look at median household income versus per capita income for our Pacific Islander population, it tells a remarkably different story. Median income for Pacific Islanders is listed at about $40,000, according to the national data. When you get down to per capita, it's down to $6,000, by far the lowest within our community. Housing affordability by income group. We also want to look at how many different houses are available depending on where you fall in comparison to the average median income. So at the far left side, you have people with 0 to 30% of the average median income. And at the top side, you have those with greater than 80% of the average median income. And you can see some of the changes. One thing that I want to point out is between the previous equity profile and our current data, if you look at the 0 to 30% AMI level, we have a greater number of households in that category and a few number of affordable houses in that category. The gap has widened for that lowest section. And then finally, the last one we want to look at, I apologize for it cutting off, but this is access to quality housing. So the housing department looks at 4 different areas of problems that you might experience within your housing, including cost burden, but also kitchen and bathroom availability, whether there are problems with the facilities. And you can see here, again, broken out by the average median income, what some of the changes have been. The blue numbers are from the previous equity profile, and the orange ones are from the current data. And you can see which households are showing none of the 4 housing problems and which have 1 or more. Again, look at that 0 to 30% AMI level, and you can see that most of the people in our community with that income group are experiencing quality issues with their housing. The majority fall within that category. This is to set a little bit of the stage for the conversation that we're going to have, because like I said, these numbers are not perfect, and it's really the experiences of the community, of all of you here, that we want to hear of, and that is really going to guide our progress forward. If you have questions about this data or want to see anything else, my email is up here, and I'm happy to hand out a card. But right now, I would like to turn it back to Bob so we can talk a little bit more and have a panel discussion about some of the realities that we're seeing in our community. Thanks so much.
This conversation tonight with my friend Anderson Sancy. If you don't know Anderson, I don't know why not. He's the City of Dubuque's Director of Prosperity and Neighborhood Support, and also a member of our school board. So panelists, if you want to come up and take these seats. So we've put together a really great panel tonight. We've got 7 people from various perspectives of the housing market, rental, home ownership. So I think we can have a very good conversation tonight. So we've got a mic, you've got a couple of mics that you guys can pass back and forth. And we're going to start here. You can go ahead and start. You want to start there? Okay. So go ahead and start, yep, Irene, and you can test. Hold the mic up close and and just tell everybody who you are and what brings you here tonight as far as your connection to housing.
Hello, everybody. My name is Irene Wallace, and I work for Airbnb. My group is right there. And I'm here. I was invited through a friend that I met in a Hispanic event. And so I'm here tonight.
Hi, my name is Margie White, and I'm a landlord in Dubuque. And I got invited, actually, I think Alexis is the one that referred me because I'm very involved in the Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher Program. I also work with Friends of the Family, and I also work with CSEI. I work with a lot of those different groups, so I'm here to share what I can with you with that.
Hi, my name is Robin McEnany. I'm a mortgage loan officer at Green State Credit Union. I've been a mortgage loan officer in Dubuque since 1999 and been with Green State for 3 years when they arrived here 3 years ago, and I'm happy to be here to share with everyone.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Lloyd Singletary, and I'm here because I was invited, and I'm happy to be here. I'm a real estate developer. I've owned and operated real estate for a little over 15 years, and I'm currently developing what was the first school in Iowa, the Prescott School, just at 12th and Central.
Good evening. My name is Yendra Dixon. I am currently the chair of the Housing Commission for the City of Dubuque. I also started the first qualified Opportunity Zone Fund in Dubuque, and so if you don't know about Opportunity Zone funds, I can talk to you about that another time. I also have a background in equitable policy, writing policy across the country. I've lived here in Dubuque for about a year, and I'm very interested in the conversation, so thanks for having me.
Good evening. I'm Alexis Steiger, the Housing and Community Development Director with the City of Dubuque. I'm obviously working with Section 8 programming, a lot of our analysis of impediments to fair housing. So I'm here just to impart some of that wisdom and hopefully start the community looking at those issues as well.
Good evening. I'm Tara Welty, and I work for Catholic Charities. I am the Housing Compliance and Contracts Manager, so I work with all of our divisions of affordable housing.
Can we give our panel a round of applause, everyone? So we'll start off with the first question, and Alexis, I would love for you to tackle it first, if you don't mind, and get a certain privilege since our cities and colleagues. And so, hopefully, what has been the challenge to creating affordable quality housing for residents?
Sure. So housing is one of the barriers that we find in the city of Dubuque. We just don't have the number of housing units that we need to support our population. So what happens is it is a market. So when there is not enough supply for the demand, the prices go up pretty quickly. And that already starts to cause an issue with affordable housing. Your prices go up because that's where the demand leads it to. So we do need more units. That's the very first barrier. But it also, on the other side, income is important. And so, making sure that the income that our residents are able to obtain in the community is also very important to the other side of the demand and being able to afford their home and pay 30% or less of their income for their housing. And housing, when we talk about 30% or less, that's not just your rent, that includes your utilities. So that is everything to stay in your home and make it habitable. And that sometimes gets overlooked as well. So I think those are the first two things that the community really needs to focus on when it comes to affordable units. We need to have more of them so that we can have that market support what our residents can afford.
And you're talking both about rental and home ownership when you're talking about that shortage?
That is correct. So units in the city of Dubuque. So the number of housing units available, we are projecting about being about 1,100 housing units short of what we are going to need in the next 10 years. That's both on home ownership side and rental.
Okay. So we don't need everybody to answer every question, but who else want to have something you want to contribute on this point? Anybody else? Indra, do you want to go ahead?
Sadly, I'll always talk. So I absolutely agree. It is extremely important that we have the number of units, and it is extremely important that we have the income to support that. But we also have to remember what Mr. Distelhoff from Green State talked about, which is there was a system that was put in place, and the disparity that exists is because the system itself is flawed. And so in order for people to get mortgages or to rent apartments, there are other people who are making decisions about that. And the system has allowed those other people to use things that are less objective in order to make the decisions about whether or not people can attain those things. So for example, in Dubuque, there are only 30% of landlords who will accept a Section 8 housing voucher. So if we have 1,100 units and and half of them are only a certain type of housing, or they're in specific zip codes, there are landlords who are not allowed or can make the choice not to give them to people who need housing. So it is important for us to understand that there are some structural barriers and there are also individuals, right? And so we take a lot of time not to talk about that in the system, but the system is made up of individuals. And this is not the time for shame or blame. It's not about who did what, who's not doing what. It's about moving forward and understanding that we can all make the choice to allow some of these barriers that exist not to exist anymore.
Margie, I guess if we could get of your perspective here, I'm curious, you've worked within the voucher system. You know some of the incentives and the things that the city has tried to do to change some of those dynamics that you're speaking of. What's kind of your take on it? What's working and what isn't? Or do you see more landlords getting involved?
I think we've seen a little uptick recently of landlords accepting it. I know that they've tried to do some education for the landlords. There's a video out there that they can watch. You okay? That can be watched, like, about the program. I don't know exactly how they have access to that, but there is a video that, like, newer landlords or landlords that are interested can watch and learn more about the actual what happens with a housing choice voucher. I think there's probably a history of housing choice voucher people not taking care of places, and that's something that needs to somehow needs to change, because I've worked with a lot of them, and yes, do I have issues? Absolutely. Absolutely have issues. But do I have issues with my open market tenants? Absolutely. I have trouble with that too. So I think there's some things, but I still think there's somehow more that we can do, hopefully, as we work through to get some of the landlords to be accepting. I don't believe that it should be required to accept it. I always disagree with it. We talk about choices. I believe that landlords and business people should be able to have that choice. But I think that if a lot of landlords got more educated on how the program actually works, and to understand things like you don't have to just accept somebody. I have the same criteria they have to meet for my Section 8 tenants that my open market tenants do. They still have to have references. They still have to meet my criteria. So we still have that control over that, even though they have a housing choice voucher.
Margie, just a follow-up question to that. As you talk about, there's more that we can do within the city to provide affordable quality housing for individuals. From the landlord's perspective, speak on landlords. What are some of the things that landlords in the city can do collectively? Jeff talked about what can we do? What can we do?
That's a good question. What can we do? I guess the one thing I said is I think education to the landlords about the program more, about that. I know we've tried a few incentives, and some of those have worked some, and some of them haven't. Maybe just getting more of the word out there on what the program is about. I know they've been trying to do some rebranding of it a little bit to put a little different twist on it than what's been before. So maybe if we can work on that together to try to get that, to get a little bit more positive take on housing choice voucher than what's out there. I think if people understood I think sometimes the inspection process is a little bit turn off for some of the landlords too, because sometimes you hear things about, well, they just really are picky, or we have things, that they do and they don't want to be involved in that process. I have a little bit different take on it. I think it's good. If they come in and find something I need to fix, then that's great. I need to fix it. And they only do those inspections every 2 years. But I think some of that education, again, I think there's that video that's out there. I just don't know for sure exactly how the landlords find that. Or, Alexis, do you have any idea? Yeah, she can answer that.
Yeah, I guess I'd like to hear from Alexis also, just regarding kind of the same question. Is there programming that the city could do to start to build this program? Obviously, it's something that we've been working on as a community for a long time.
Sure. There are several barriers that come with the tenant. If you already need a voucher, you didn't have a deposit. And if you do, you might need help with it. You might need half of the assistance to even get into a unit. And so you just don't come to the market ready. So then a market rate person kind of takes it out from underneath you because there aren't that many units and landlords aren't going to wait. So some of the barriers are internal as well, where there's processes, there's a system. I mean, we just talked about the system can cause those barriers for tenants. And then the landlords are turned off by the barriers as well. So there's some work, and we're working on it internally at the city. HUD is also working on getting rid of those barriers. And landlords are coming to the table, and they're meeting with the city and telling us what the barriers are for the acceptance so that we can start removing those barriers. And that video is on our website, cityofdubuque.org/housing.
Lloyd, I see you want to grab the microphone. Do you have some thoughts on that too?
Can you ask your question again? Because I feel like it was lost.
Well, the question was, what can we do?
As landlords, as
developers, what can we do to create the affordable quality housing in Dubuque?
I think one of the first things that we can do as landlords is to have better standards. One of the things, and I've been a renter, I am a renter here in Dubuque right now, even though I'm developing property. And so I'm thankful to Gronin for having a nice place for me to stay. But it was a real toss-up that was even made. I'm talking about looking at the stop and saying, I don't know where the units. And I'm surprised that the units available will act as condition here in the city. So one of the things that I think that we can do, we're talking about quality and affordable housing, is all of the people who are in a spot as landlords or property owners themselves, but many of them who will never be caught dead living in any other places that they own. And so landlords can do better by doing better by the people that they house.
So, yeah. Yendra, your thoughts?
Yeah, I'll just have one. I don't know. I think that's absolutely true, and I think that's true on the market rate side, and in addition to the housing voucher side. I think it's very important for us to recognize that when we look at neighborhoods that are run down, the people who live there are not the homeowners, and so if we're not going to hold those homeowners to a standard to bring that neighborhood back up, then we cannot put the burden on the renters to try to do that. However, one of the things I will say directly in terms of programs that exist from the housing department and other departments is it is really important to deal in sort of reality, right? So on the one hand, we have an opportunity for low-income homeowners to get a loan to improve their home. But if you are a 75-year-old woman who lives alone and maybe you're in a wheelchair with an oxygen tank, how are you even going to start the process, in the North End to improve your facility? You don't even have any, wherewithal, right, to do something like that. And so I think it's important for us to make sure that the programs that we do offer are things that we can actually use in the community. That if there are landlords who are willing to do updates before they, take in renters who meet an income requirement, that we hold them accountable for getting those renters that meet the income requirement, but we allow them to do those things without necessarily having a renter. There are some programs that require that. Or, we have a process that talks to people and really walks people through how they can, improve their home if that's what they want to do. And then I think that, other things would be, looking at things like there's lead remediation programs that we offer, and those things are great. But a lot of the things that are on the street and in this neighborhood have asbestos as well. There's even asbestos remediation programs as well. So really just looking at the programs that we offer and making sure that they meet the market need in terms of what we want to do to improve the housing stock and move landlords forward to become more qualified.
Right. In an effort to get through to some of our other panelists into the conversation. Okay, I'm going to go up here, see if this helps. You want to go behind him? So in an effort to get some of the other panelists into the conversation, let's talk a little bit about homeownership, particularly first-time homeowners. Andrew described a little bit of what we know about how we got to this place, but I'd be curious to hear from your experiences some of the challenges to get people into their first home, maybe something that you experienced and the folks that you work with.
Mortgages begin and end, unfortunately, with credit and income. And so somebody needs to have the ability to be able to have the employment, to have the income, to be able to buy a home and afford a home. They need to have the credit, and many times, if you're talking to someone young or you're talking to somebody that has not been educated with credit, you're having to start from a situation where they need to rebuild credit. They need to be chatting with somebody that can take the opportunity, that's willing to take the opportunity to sit down, go over their credit, hopefully try to give them pointers to increase the credit. At times, sometimes somebody needs a little bit more holding and take them through the steps. And so as a loan officer or as a lender, you need to be able to realize where first-time home buyers are in many cases, whether it's somebody of color or somebody younger or older that's never owned a home, has never seen somebody in their family own a home, and they just don't even know where to start. So in starting education, whether you're doing it within the person or on the phone, and figuring out if there are any barriers, and then educating them on what's important as far as being able to own a home, critically how to do it.
I'm going to ask this additional question this time, if you don't mind me talking about. Earlier, we talked about the work that you do, and specifically on the drawing community and the game asking English as the first language. Could you talk about that for us?
Yeah, so I think that what we're doing today is so great because education is super important. We're all together learning, educating each other. So for me, I feel like meeting all of you today is going to bring so much wealth for me to, like when I stand in front of the people that I need to help when they come forward to me and say, hey, I need to buy a house. And I think the more educated I am and the persons that I refer them to, the better the whole process will go. So for example, what she was saying about the credit, and so this is what I love what we're doing, and I'm here. Well, I'm bilingual, so I speak Spanish and fully fluent in both languages and English. I was born in Colombia, but raised in different countries, and I'm fortunate to know English. And then I'm here, and anyways, just for example, me being here and you guys knowing, hey, now I know this girl that speaks Spanish, and she could help this Hispanic people that I met, and that's a beginning here. I like that.
Yeah, you told me that you already had that experience as somebody where the language barrier was a barrier to housing, and they were delighted to connect with you and have you be able to walk them through it.
Yeah, that's true, because they feel more comfortable, and last time they were like, oh my God, I'm so happy that you speak my language, and it just made the connection much better. So it's not saying, I can help all the community, obviously, for everybody, but it's a plus for the Hispanic community to have someone that can help them in their language.
And it speaks to the need for diversity within the realty community.
Yes. I try to always participate in all the Latin events. Like there's going to be one now in October. I try to go to every reunion to put myself out there and let them know, hey. And they have already come to me, and I tell them, look, you need to do this and that. And then they're like, okay, I can't buy a house right now. But then they will one day, So it's step by step. Yeah.
Tara, do you want to share a little bit from your experience at Catholic Charities? Some of the obstacles you've seen?
Yes. Can you hear me? Perfect. So there's a lot of obstacles that we overcome and face with Catholic Charities. I'm going to kind of piggyback with the vouchers. We do take those at our properties, and they turn out to be great tenants. They're all striving for the same goal, which is affordable housing, home ownership, but we don't have those homes in those price ranges for those people. Also, with coming to Dubuque, a lot of people come to Dubuque. It's a beautiful city. It's affordable, and mostly, and the resources directing them where they can go for help with the city. Where can they go to get help if they need assistance with that deposit? Just getting those resources out to the community is a big thing for life, so getting people on the right track to affordable housing.
Lloyd, we need to go in real quick. You were a page today. What a great article. I'm curious, as a developer, you chose to come to Dubuque and develop, and I'm just curious why, and what are some of the challenges you are experiencing right now trying to develop properties in the community?
So it's a really, really long story why I'm here developing in Dubuque. I don't know if we have time for it, but long story short, my brother from another mother went to school at UD, and I ended up taking a house that we bought on Almond Street, which was for him for $15,000, and deciding to flip it. It didn't turn into a flip. HGTV, they lie. That's not really true. And so we did end up finally selling it and everything. But there were so many opportunities here in Dubuque. There are, where I'm from in Philadelphia, you couldn't go past a property that was half a mile from multiple universities. Or let you have it. And so there were so many places available here. And so I'm here developing this property just because obviously we don't have a property for $76,000 properties that we need to think about. And so here doing it on YouTube, and that's how I ended up living. We talked about challenges. Obviously, the biggest challenge is paying all the bills when when you're under, you're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to get things done. But I will say that developing in the city of Dubuque is amazing. compared to Philadelphia and probably any other big city, just because there's not the same red tape or issues. And so I'm having some challenges, but it's just because I'm not rich.
Well, thanks for doing that. So we have seen some city programs, some county programs, Greater Dubuque development programs to try to address this issue over the last several years. For those of you who've been around a little while, can you speak to that as far as maybe what's working, what hasn't worked, and why that was?
We actually changed a lot of programs to the City of Dubuque Housing Department because we were finding that they weren't meeting the outcomes that we were anticipating. One of the things is increasing home ownership in any of our minority populations. And so we were running a first-time homebuyer program that helps with down payment assistance. And what we found is that we helped a lot of white women. Also in need of housing, however, it wasn't meeting the outcomes that were stated for that program. So we dug into the data to see what was the barrier. Why are we not serving the people that we are trying to reach in our community? And we found credit scores becoming actually the biggest barrier, especially as COVID hit. If you already were low mod income and you were trying to find a way to pay down payment and get a $140,000 house for your first time home, you suddenly no longer had income for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and all of your savings disappeared. And then you had to go to collections and your credit score just tanked. So we have now been teaming with states and all of the credit unions to try to help rebuild those credit scores, and we've changed some of the programs to support that. We still have a first-time buyer because that's the work through credit bureau. That program is going to start meeting the needs of the community to get more minorities of ownership. Really need that ownership to build generational wealth. And so we really need our programs to start supporting that.
Go ahead.
One of the aspects of our $1 billion commitment is to take credit off the table to an extent. So when you're looking at mortgages, when you're looking at money, you're looking at credit scores that they have, but the $1 billion allows us to take the credit score down a little bit. Credit's always going to matter, but you can look at it in a different scope, and you can help us. That's our commitment, is to help people that have been marginalized in the communities as far as being able to buy a home. And so we've been able to take credit off the table to an extent, help them repair some credit, but also, too, if somebody has a credit score of 610, and you have to tell them no, as opposed to if their credit score was 630, we've made that barrier go away to an extent as long as it makes sense. And so that was part of the commitment for the $1 billion.
Well, thank you so much. And we can spend a lot of time talking about the challenges, the opportunities to address the system and also to support people. Last time we had a community conversation, we didn't have enough time to allow the people in the audience to ask a question. So we do want to open that up for a few people who want to ask any of the panels a question. If you can just raise your hand and we'll come to you. Okay, there's a lot of hands coming up. Okay. All right. We'll go right here, then. Okay.
I just want, can you hear me? I'd like to know how you're going to address the mobile home situation.
Any comments on the mobile home situation that's going on right now? Where they try to solve it? For any of those who are aware of that, Alexis?
I could touch a little bit on that. It's unfortunately sitting with the state. State has been passing legislation that doesn't allow cities and counties to step into those realms to help. Basically, if there's a predatory increase in rents for a lot, etc. So we're working really diligently with our legislators to see if we can make some changes at that level, and making sure that residents are safe. So the other thing that we can do is making sure that the connections, the water connections, the utilities and things are safe and being billed correctly, So we're doing the things we can until the legislator decide to take different action and allow us to do more.
Thank you. Next question.
Everybody on the panel. Why is it that I'm one of the only handful of board people actually at this event?
I think that has to do a lot with outreach. I think in a lot of these situations, it's very easy for people like us to bring other people like us to a conversation to hear us speak. And what we don't do is walk the neighborhoods and knock on doors and ask people, go to our tenants and say, hey, we're having this discussion, because some of us don't want to hear what's actually wrong or really address the problem. So I think the one big thing that's different about this event, which is probably something that we maybe should do for a lot of other events in Dubuque, is that it's live streamed. It gives an access to a lot of folks who wouldn't have been able to see what was happening before and have an understanding of who is here and how they can get in touch with them and what we were talking about, be able to ask questions going forward. So hopefully bring some friends with you for the next one.
That's a great response. And what's our role and responsibility? Let's clap for that. Let's clap for that. We'll clap for that. Absolutely, we all have a role and responsibility to bring someone with us, right? And it's a great question. Where are those who are most underserved, right? Some of them are in our neighborhoods. And we hear about opportunities like this, let's bring it in. We also need to understand how to make room for those who are most marginalized in the decision-making process. So again, there's a lot of opportunities to make sure as we try to figure out solutions, those who are closest to the problem are closest to the solution will have the rights to come up with what's best for the neighborhoods, all right? And so there was someone right here. Then I'm going to come over here.
One question I have that's one of the biggest issues that I see that's especially happening in the downtown area that hasn't been addressed at all is Airbnb. So a lot of the landlords that I have talked to who aren't afraid of sharing their opinions, are saying, why would I want to continue to rent other people when I can just make the same amount in a couple of days from people just using my place in Airbnb? What I'm seeing going on in the neighborhood is that people are buying properties or kicking people out and then flipping those homes into Airbnb, and then no one has to pay something. So we were talking about addressing the issue of available housing. This is really causing a problem. Places like San Francisco and New York and San Francisco. Anyways, they have legislation that requires Airbnb people to live on the property. So you have a duplex or something like that. You have to live in one section of it. And New Orleans is the other place. To prevent coming in, because I've seen this on the block, someone from Florida has come up here to create an Airbnb so that he can basically extract money out of this and then move back down to Florida. So is there anything that, if people thought about this at all?
Thoughts on?
I'll throw it up. What I will say is that, Airbnb is not necessarily the issue, right? Part of it, as we talked about here on the panel, is that it's a supply and demand. And so if you have a home that you buy here and you're able to do some improvements for it, and the rent that you need in order to be profitable as a business owner that Margie talked about, needs to be higher than, say, the voucher amount is or what the market rate rent is, then your next opportunity in order to make money is an Airbnb. I'm not saying that's right. I'm saying that is a business owner's sort of choice in order to make that. But what I do think is important is that we, understand what Airbnb is, how it is good for some communities and not good for other communities. We're never going to be able to regulate what every homeowner does in every single unit. We're never going to be able to say, like Margie said, we're never going to be able to force people to take Section 8 vouchers. We're never going to be able to force business owners to make specific business decisions. But what we can do is have smart, comprehensive policy at the local level that regulates who can do what when, how that can happen. We can extract more taxes from someone who has an Airbnb. That's been a strategy in other places. So there are ways to make that happen. I can't say that necessarily answers your question, but what I will say is that there has to be a mechanism so that everybody can do what needs to be done, that we can have higher quality, affordable units available for people who actually need them, that we don't have income source discrimination about where that money's coming from to pay for them, and that we can provide the number of units that are necessary so that people do not go unhoused in Dubuque. And that's what our commitment should be.
Alexis, is there any discussion around Airbnb and from a city perspective? Is there any policy that's been discussed?
So back to the Iowa legislator. They have.
All right, we're going to have to get Pam Yoakum up here pretty quick.
Yeah, so they've restricted us again. So your city council members asked us that same question: what can we do to help with some of the Airbnb issues? And the state legislature said nothing. You cannot treat them any different than a homeowner, as if they live there and in the home. So we cannot inspect them more. We cannot zone them differently. We cannot extract additional taxes like many other states and cities and counties are allowed to do. And so our hands are very tied by your state of Iowa.
So write your legislator, it sounds like there, huh?
We have a question right here.
Okay.
I'm still not clear how people in poverty or low income areas can have no equity. I mean, you're talking about supply housing, but we do have a lot of very low houses in it. You mentioned, I think, Amy, that no one wants to live in it. Would the city ever consider buying some of these down homes and providing ways for people to build back through the rent? Because I have been in these new apartments where people are paying $700, $800 a month for just a horrible situation. And do they have a prayer, even if we have more housing, how are they going to be able to afford to move into that housing?
One of the items that I noticed on there was the amount of income that is paid to rent whenever you're renting. And some of the, I think it was really high in the Black community. And if you can get the home ownership to for them to be able to buy a home, then their monthly payment is going to be quite a bit lower than what they're paying in rent. And they're going to be able to build equity by being able to have the availability to buy a home. So buying a home and being educated and being able to have those opportunities is where somebody is going to be able to build the equity, be able to have more wealth. And it begins with the home ownership and getting them out of the majority of their income going to rent each month. Also, too, I believe the city has programs for low income, that if somebody is low income and they buy a house, I believe there is some money available where you help with some mortgage payment. Is that correct? Am I correct there?
Yes, we do have some of those programs. And also, to your point, it takes those people around you. So the nonprofits in Dubuque have been extremely helpful in this situation, in that we have partners that are rehabilitating those properties that are dilapidated, and they're selling them for home ownership, or they're doing a responsible rent to own. So we've partnered with Ani, and there are others in the community and they're actually here at the table today that are helping and start that process in Dubuque, and it's starting to really work. We're seeing the neighborhoods turn around. We're seeing those dilapidated houses turn back over to affordable home ownership for those that maybe were paying that rent and are able to instead do a rent to own. So they do continue to start building that equity, or we get them into our programs to help with the down payment and to help with some of that first initial barriers to home ownership and get them into the home. So that we are starting that program, and yes, the city's working on it, but it's with all of the nonprofits that you see around you that's possible.
Okay, last question right here. You're up.
Yeah. Go back to the whole situation. Our park is on both sides. One is in the county and one is in the city. We've been to several meetings together, the city manager and those people, and every time we go, we basically get told there's nothing they can do about it. Even though the park is in the city limits, nobody will help. We've been to the Capitol. It's these big corporations that they're all letting them feed and buy out these parks and push out people that would normally be able to afford them. They're pushing them out, and that's causing more of a housing problem.
And we are, when we say we're limited by the legislator, we're limited in the large policy decisions that can go to the city council. And so that's what you're hearing at those meetings. But what we're doing behind the scenes to help individuals is actually where we're making bigger strides because of, the hands being tied at the policy level. So we are doing outreach for residents that are starting to feel like they can no longer afford their rent. Our housing choice vouchers, we made the change that you can actually get a housing choice voucher for lot rent to help bring that cost back down. Does that get rid of the private increase in the rent? No, but we are working from within what we can do in those areas. Between city and county, the county is decided the cities and the state regulating that. So unfortunately, both sides are in the same situation. And the county is both have access to individuals. We're also looking at a few, there are a few nonprofits out there that do private parks and areas so that they can get the ordinance back down and so we are trying to person to see if we can get that to behind the scenes, we have actually had conversations for the last 2 months with 2 nonprofits that do that and are interested in coming to Dubuque. So we are working diligently to bring to Dubuque what we can.
Okay, well, thank you. These folks are going to be sticking around, so we may be able to address some things individually. Some of you that have other questions. I would like to run down the row here and have everybody give at least one more comment here quickly. I'm curious what takeaways can we have. So if you've got these folks that care enough to come out here tonight, what's the message that you want them to go home with? What's something actionable that we can do to try to help resolve some of these issues that we're talking about?
Keep talking about it. Keep raising your concerns. We are listening, us in the community. We want the best for Dubuque. What I would encourage is let people know about other resources you do know about for housing. Be their knowledge bank. Just let them know that the city of Dubuque has resources. Catholic Charities has resources. Just educate the community, and that's the best thing we can do to keep growing this affordable housing.
I think we need to make sure that we keep equity at the forefront of those conversations. The way we do something, people is great, but we make sure that we bring that so that everybody has access, not just the people that we may know, but people who may know as well, so that you're getting down that line to everybody who has needs, making sure they're coming to the table and finding the person they're comfortable talking to. They're not always comfortable coming to the city of Dubuque to get help. So who are they comfortable with, and making sure you find that resource for them. That's going to help with the community in a lot larger way than you think you can as an individual.
Communities are made up of people, and people change things. So the more that you get your neighbors together, the more that you show up to everything that you can, the more that you advocate for someone who has less than you or someone that you know is in a situation. That's how you use your powers for good, and that's how we change and overturn any barrier in the system that exists today.
I would say one of the things that we developed here is to be advocates for you and advertise for you. If you're here and you are a landowner, you own real estate, don't hide it. Tell people. I literally was talking to one of my friends and that I went to UPenn with, and he's buying a 6 unit.
on Loris right now. So continue to tell people about Dubuque, because people need to know. If they knew there was a housing shortage and a wonderful market where you could come in and add units and do things, people will come, but you got to tell people. So I would say advertise. The next thing that I would say, I'm trying to remember, is higher standards. I don't know who sets the standards at the housing department. If we're talking about the condition of housing, we need to have higher standards, because we have standards for restaurants. If you go into a place to eat, you expect them to have certain standards. For renters, for people renting homes, let's raise the standards. The last piece that's systemic, and I could talk for a long, long time about why I'm a Black man in Dubuque and I can buy a house, I can afford one, but it boils down to education, and there's so much more, but I'm going to stop it there.
Good. When you can make a difference, where you see a need, step up and make a difference. I sat in some meetings earlier this year. I probably should have been in these meetings 10, 15 years ago. It's never too late to make a difference. There was some really tough talk today, some hard questions, some hard facts to see. But if you all just make a difference in our world, you see it, make a difference, and speak up when you need.
I think just the communication between as a landlord, as having rental units, just the communication with the city, with the cooperation, with working together and trying to all go have the same goals and work at having good, affordable housing and I agree that the standards need to be, good across the board. We need to provide our residents with nice places to live. I think we work really closely. I'm a part of the Landlord Association here in Dubuque, and we work really closely with the city. We have meetings we usually have them every month. We do talk about a lot of the stuff at the meetings, and so I think that we keep that communication open, and just all try to go in the same direction.
I was here, I think what I was going to say, but I think that for when you were talking about how more white people have own houses, and so reflecting on how the city of Dubuque can provide more for the minorities so that percentage goes up. Maybe incentives, programs, I don't know, something to motivate those communities to buy. And I think another thing that we've all talked is educating, so that people, why buy versus renting and the benefits and all that. I think.
Thank you. These panelists came here tonight not knowing what questions might be thrown at them, and I just want to thank you all for coming tonight. Please show them your gratitude as well.
And yes, and a few additional things that each and every single one of you can do. Don't let the conversation stop. There's a lot of data on the side that you can look at. There's a lot of people in here that you can connect with to continue the conversation. As we mentioned earlier, there's going to be a lot of community conversation in the community. If you're not part of that, we strongly encourage you to do that. We have some trained facilitators that are going to help with the conversation. And also for those who are saying, well, what about those who are most marginalized? The city of Dubuque did create a department specifically with a tall guy by the name of Anderson Sansi, who's managing that department, who's responsible for connecting with those who are most marginalized. So as we meet with the landlords, if you are part of those communities and want to meet with our department, let's make it happen. That's a clear action we can do, that I can be a voice for you. And now we're going to invite Mr. Bob to come up with some final words.
All right, thanks, Anderson. From one tall guy to another. I think we're pretty equal on that stature area. Some great takeaways here, and I jotted down a few of them. I think the panel did a great job. I have a whole list of potential takeaways, and we'll be talking about a little bit those. We heard a lot about education for landlords. We talked about incentives. We talked about being market ready from a tenant standpoint. We talked about understanding what was needed for income, credit, and debt ratios. A whole lot of others, and you heard a lot of others from this panel. So I think we've got some really good takeaways, and we'll talk about this more. This conversation on housing does not end here, does not end tonight. We're going to keep this conversation going. I think a couple of our panelists mentioned that. So we will not let this end now. The other thing I want to mention is that one of the ways you can be involved is on the Community Foundation's Community Conversations. These are some of the dates and locations that are coming up with the at Wartburg Theological Seminary coming up on September 13th. You can see the other ones up here on your screen. If you want to find out more, come up and take a look, jot them down, or contact the Community Foundation. Get involved in these conversations. They'll be facilitated by trained facilitators. This conversation is really important, and we really appreciate the Community Foundation for putting that together. Something else I want you to know about. There is an initiative and a large group of folks who have come together called Dubuque Forward. Dubuque Forward, I feel like there's a couple of elements to this process. And being a computer guy back in previous life, I think in terms of hardware and software. Hardware to me is places to go, places to live, amenities, restaurants, things to do, activities, and stuff like that. The software is the culture. The software is how we act. The software is how we think, feel, do, how we treat each other, how welcoming we are, what kind of programs we put in place, how active we are in these conversations, and how much we follow through. That's the cultural component. But Dubuque Forward's doing some really interesting and good stuff. If you don't know about it, learn about it a little bit more. See how you might be interested in getting involved from what I call the hardware standpoint. And there's a DEI component to that as well. So we applaud Andy, Debbie Butler, John Gronin, and the rest of the many people who are involved in Dubuque Forward. Don't forget, our next session is September 28th. It's going to be right back here. Again, we're going to be talking about workforce and economic development. Then we have sessions coming up in October, January, February. Look for those. We'll be talking about more of those. Lastly, I want to thank again, and hang on for 2 seconds, thank our sponsors, John Deere Dubuque Works, Cottingham and Butler, Hodge Companies, Greater Dubuque Development Corporation, Dubuque Area Chamber of Commerce, Northeast Iowa Community College, and of course tonight's lead sponsor, Green State Credit Union. And we'll have a lead sponsor, a different one for each session. So thank you for all of them. And thank you, Jeff, for coming and joining us tonight. And lastly, I would be remiss if I didn't thank you on behalf of everybody at TH Media. We have a lot of our team here today putting together the live stream, all of the elements, the logistics, along with the Community Foundation. So we have got an incredible team at TH Media, and our goal is connecting our community. This is an important role for us, and that's why we're doing this tonight. If you want to talk and learn more, please talk to our panelists. They're going to stick around for a little bit, grab a spot, grab a drink, continue the conversation. Thanks for coming tonight. We'll see you on September 28th.
Thank you.